Hi everyone, I'm Graham Brannan. I'm the Project Support Coordinator for the faculty.
Thanks for that. So let's move on to the next slide, Graham, and we'll just do some housekeeping. You should see now a tab at the top of your screen saying this is being recorded. I hope that's okay with everyone. We will put it up on usually our YouTube channel, and we'll circulate the link to yourselves as well. We would request that everyone please keep themselves on mute, obviously, unless you're speaking or asking questions. We are happy with cameras being on, but I think sometimes it interferes with connectivity, I believe. So it might be that if we start to go off, we'll just request you to keep your cameras off. We are on Twitter, as you know, and our handle is there. We will be tweeting today as well. So you might see your photographs on Twitter if that's okay with yourselves. So without much further ado, I'd like to hand over to Charlotte to start off this celebration event. Over to you, Charlotte.
Yeah, so just a bit of an agenda first. So first, we're going to talk about just what we've achieved through the CPEP programme, then what's next after the project ends. Then we're going to be hearing from our partner organisations and some of our workstream members who are going to be talking about either how as an organisation they've successfully met their target of increased numbers or their experiences of being involved in this project. And then we're going to be closing down with Nisha ending the presentation today. So just a bit of a timeline for those of you that don't know this already. So in July 2020, Health Education England asked for bids to be placed. This was national for the CPEP programmes. And then in September 2020, the funds were actually awarded to the successful organisations or collaboratives, and £15 million was awarded nationally. In October 2020, St Helens and Knowsley Teaching Hospitals, as the host organisation for the faculty, received our successful funding, and we received £200,000. Between October and November, there was a recruitment process for the project team, and the project team started in post in November. Between November and June, we've been working with our partner organisations and then our various workstream members to create our strategies, our toolkit, and try and successfully increase the number of placements that we're able to offer. So we actually launched our toolkit in June this year, and we submitted our data to Health Education England to show that we'd successfully achieved our aims. July this month, we've been handing over what we've created, so primarily our toolkit, to those that are actually going to be using it, and then the project will finish in August. So our goal when we set out to start the project was that we needed to increase the number of sustainable placements by 100 placements across 13 organisations that are involved in our project and across 10 different allied health professionals. And it was really important that these placements were new and sustainable placements, and they didn't just get tied up in the COVID recovery placements or other just one-off placements. So we decided that the strategy that we wanted to go with to achieve our aim of 100 placements was to develop this toolkit, which I'm sure you've heard us all talking about before. But for those of you that don't know, the toolkit is a series of different strategies that would help an educator or teams successfully increase the number of students that they're able to offer placements to. So you can see here what we call our flower diagram, and those are all the different strategies that we've got in our toolkit at the moment. So this isn't an exhaustive list, and we're hoping to add to this over the next few months or hopefully years. And this toolkit is hosted currently on the Health Education England Learning Hub. And the Learning Hub can be accessed by any health or social care professional or health and social care student. And we've put a link at the end of this presentation to our catalogue where you'll be able to find our toolkit. So what have we actually achieved then as part of our CPEP project? So we set out to increase by 100 placements, and we actually increased by 127 additional sustainable placements, which is obviously great. We've also been building future leaders. So in the faculty, we've been able to have 6 pre-registration physiotherapy students with us on placement. And that has equated to just over 750 additional hours of placements that we've been able to provide. We've created a new policy. So one of our strategies was the use of laptops and other smart devices. So we needed to create a IG policy so that if the student was using a trust-owned laptop or other hardware from home, they would be covered using that. And then we've shared that IG policy with the other 13 organisations that are involved in our project. So hopefully they didn't have to recreate something that we've created. We've been investing in hardware. So we transferred just over £110,000 between the 13 organisations to purchase laptops to be used for student placements. So this might be if a student was, for example, doing a completely remote placement, they might be able to use it for that purpose. We've been supporting placement educators, so showing them our toolkit and then enabling them to look through it and choose a strategy that might work for them to increase their numbers, and helping them decide based on the problems that they've got which strategy might be suitable for them. We've created a series of webinars. I think at the moment there's probably 8 on there at the moment. And these webinars cover topics such as like leadership placements and text-based placements. So that if you were looking or interested in offering these types of placements, you would have a resource that could give you ideas about how you might implement this, or give you examples of where this has already been done successfully by other educators. We've been exploring new placement areas, so as I've just been saying with the text and leadership placements, but we've also looked at multi-student supervision models as well. So where 1 or more students are in place, where 2 or more students are on placement together, and how we facilitate those. We've been building networks. So recently we set up a network of toolkit champions who are going to take the toolkit forward once we finish in post in August and the project comes to a close. And then we've created a series of fresh resources. So as part of one of our strategies, we had created a series of videos. So part of these were live patient-clinician interactions that we filmed. And then some of them were some scripted case studies that we filmed. And these are all hosted on our Learning Hub next to our toolkit. So you can see here the breakdown of the 127 placements that we have created, sustainable placements. As you'd expect, physio was the largest, because physio is the largest profession, but we were able to cover the 10 different allied health professional groups that we set out to cover. And this 127 was actually an 11.7% increase on our baseline figures, which is great. So although it has been quite stressful at times doing this project, we have had a number of laughs, and it has been quite entertaining as well, especially when creating the videos. So Graham is now going to share with you some of this. So I'll hand over to Graham.
So, like Charlotte said, it's been such a fun project to be a part of. So we've had put together some of our a little bloopers reel for everyone. So let's hope it plays.
Sound isn't on, Graham.
Sorry, just bear with me a second. The one thing which I always forget to do.
So while Graham's doing that, you might spot some familiar faces. So let's see if you do.
Does it sound?
Evening meal, corned beef hash, broccoli, gravy. Evening meal, corned beef hash, broccoli. Evening meal, corned beef hash.
Okay, well I'll be behind you just to support you first, in case.
Okay.
And I'll make sure that I run with the
She has been really quite frustrated and disappointed with the outcome of this. But you know, as we said, we've followed it up with a I got it wrong. Who knew it's so hard to read a bloody line?
Morning, Sue.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, not bad. How are you?
Not too bad. Did you have a good weekend?
It was good. Really relaxing. What did you get to?
I would have conducted with you as part of the EST team. Would that be all right?
Well, I didn't agree with most.
Sorry, I've just realised they are there. I'm like, I can see her so much better. You okay? Are you all right? Don't be doing anything proper.
Jeez, well, he's in good hands.
Hi, my name's Lauren. I'm the physio that's been working with Iris on the acute stroke unit.
Okay. And Frankie?
Just don't forget to take yourself off mute.
Oh my god.
Hi, Stuart.
Right.
Have a seat.
I've got a patient that I think needs to be seen by an advanced practitioner.
Okay.
We also have artificial saliva sprays, which do as they say on the tin. God's sake! Does what it says on the tin.
Evening meal, corned beef hash, broccoli, gravy and a bread roll. Why do I always get the giggles?
Thanks, Graham. Okay, so what's next? We have, as I was saying before, we've set up our Toolkit Champions working group and they've had their first meeting. The aim of this group is going to be to promote the toolkit primarily. So they're going to be promoting it within their individual organisations, but making sure it filters down to team level and educator level, as they're going to be the people that are actually going to be using the strategies. Once the kind of promotion initially has been done, they'll then be focusing on the development of the toolkit further, so adding more resources as they appear, but also scoping out new different placement models as and when they appear as well, to put them in as new strategies. At the moment, we've got 30 toolkit champions from 11 organisations, and I'm now going to hand over to Denise and Lucy, who are two of our toolkit champions from East and Mid Cheshire Trust, and they're going to be speaking about their experience of CPEP.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hi everyone, it's lovely to see everyone here today. My name is Lucy O'Driscoll. I'm a podiatrist from Central Cheshire Integrated Care Partnership and I've been on secondment for the past 7 months as the Practice Education Development Project Lead for Mid Cheshire Hospitals. I've been working jointly with my colleague Denise Lavelle, who is a speech and language therapist and has been on secondment as the Practice Education Development Project Lead for East Cheshire Trust. We are going to tell you about how we approach the clinical placement expansion programme across the 2 trusts. Next slide please, Graham. The first thing we did was to identify the aims of our project. They were to increase the AHP student placement capacity across the trusts. Both trusts have historically struggled to fill the placement capacity available in some professions due to our geographical locations. So we identified that one of our aims needed to be to try and increase the number of placements that are actually utilised. And we needed to build on the huge amount of work that was already underway within our PEF teams. Next slide, please. We achieved a lot in a short space of time, including trialling different placement models and developing interprofessional learning. And I'm just going to give brief details of each of these achievements. Next slide, please. Both of our trusts have tended to use 1-to-1 placement models, so we have trialled 2-to-1 and 3-to-1 placement models in physio and speech and language therapy. We're very mindful of the pressures that staff have been under due to COVID, and so have several areas that are willing to trial these placement models next academic year. We are hoping that this will give staff more time to recover from the pressures of COVID so that they can trial these placement models without the additional stress they are currently under and make it a positive experience for them. Next slide, please. The virtual blended placements we have tried have been very successful. We have had students who have completed placements comprising of some days on a clinical placement and some days virtually, and we have developed a whole virtual learning day. Next slide, please. MMU have developed an online virtual village called Burley Place, which they use with their students during lectures. Working with East Cheshire Trust, they developed an interprofessional empathy-centred care day for students, which they trialled in February. Since April, we have run a session a month across both trusts, which students have been invited to. The interprofessional training days have been very well evaluated by the students who have attended them and provide a full day's clinical hours that the clinical educator does not have to oversee. Next slide, please. Denise and I have had 4 third-year physio students completing completely virtual project-based placements with us. They helped us develop electronic induction packs for students and are currently helping us to plan AHP Day in October. Next slide, please. With the funding from the AHP Faculty CPEP project, East Cheshire have purchased 6 laptops and Mid Cheshire have purchased 4 laptops, which will be available for students to support their learning. Next slide, please. We have set up a clinical educators group to act as a forum for clinical educators from both trusts to share good practice and discuss any problems they are having with alternative placement models. We had the first meeting on the 1st of July, and Nisha and Charlotte attended to talk about the work of the faculty and the toolkit that has been developed. The Clinical Educators Group will help us to continue to support our AHPs with different placement models and keep highlighting the importance of AHP student placements for our future workforce. Next slide, please. Last but not least, did we achieve the increase in placements that we needed to? These figures are East Cheshire and Mid Cheshire combined and show a significant increase in the number of students who have attended a placement. Even in some of the smaller professions, such as dietetics and speech and language therapy, a significant increase has been achieved. Next slide, please. Another important part of the data we've been collecting is the total amount of placements offered to the HEIs. This slide focuses on East Cheshire figures, but a substantial increase has been achieved across both trusts, which we have ensured is sustainable and not a one-off increase with some of the additional support we have put into place. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Lucy. So how did we achieve this expansion? Well, we started off by creating a survey monkey exploring the barriers to taking students. We sent this survey to all AHPs across both trusts. Some common themes were identified across the two trusts, such as lack of interprofessional education and that clinical educators required more support. This information gave us a really good idea of what areas we needed to focus on. We also maximised the number of clinical educators trained. We did this by promoting any training being run by the HEIs. We also linked in with the ELI project, the multi-professional framework, who are developing an online clinical education module. Once up and running, we will share this training with all AHP teams. As Lucy has mentioned, we also introduced alternative placement models, which help to increase student capacity. Next slide, please. In both East and Mid Cheshire Trusts, we have the same issue related to unused capacity. We met with HEIs to explore the reasons for this unused capacity and also offered some of these placements to HEIs outside the North West. We also looked at developing new placements with other partners in both the primary care and social sector. Links have been formed which will help to increase placement capacity in the future. We also promoted the benefits of having students, such as recruitment, and explained the reasons for student expansion. Staff were then more informed, and this helped to reduce resistance to taking more students. During the project, we were very aware that there was a lot of great work happening in the area of student expansion. We tried to minimise duplication by working closely with the PEF team, Cheshire and Merseyside faculty, students, educators, HEIs and Health Education England. We shared knowledge across trusts and attended all relevant webinars to stay informed. Next slide, please. This slide shows a timeline of the project. So in July 2020, the bid was entered. I started in my role in November and then Lucy in January. And we then sent out the survey as discussed at the beginning of the project. In February, we ran the first Burley Place training day, and we have run one every month since. We had our first clinical educator group meeting in July, and the project will come to an end in August. Next slide, please. Throughout the project, we collected feedback from students who trialled alternative placement models and also those who attended the Burley Place training days. This slide shows some of the feedback we received. Feedback included enjoying the interactive discussions during the interprofessional training and also having more confidence in face-to-face sessions due to their blended placement. Next slide, please. We also collected clinical educator feedback. Some comments received included a reduced time burden for therapists when completing a blended placement. They also found the Burley Place Day useful as it allowed them to attend to usual work demands. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to discuss Lucy and I's experience of doing the project. Having come from a purely clinical background, I have learned so much about the world of practice education. I've really enjoyed the role and working closely with the PEF team and Lucy. Next slide, please. Lucy also enjoyed working on this collaborative project. She hopes that the clinical educator group that we have set up will support educators on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. Although it has been a very positive experience, it has not been all plain sailing. Some of the challenges we experienced included funding coming partway through the academic year and our posts finishing at the end of August. Without a dedicated resource, some of the momentum may be lost. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, It was more challenging and staff were reluctant at times to take more students, mainly due to the pressure they were already under. Next slide, please. Some of the top tips we have to share include joint working across both trusts. This worked really well as both trusts faced similar challenges and it allowed for collaboration and support. We would advise to build relationships with HEIs and network with stakeholders to minimise duplication. We also feel that it's really important to meet with clinical educators and discuss student expansion and also the reasons for it. Finally, as Lucy and I both worked clinically prior to this post, it really helped as we could relate to the challenges educators were facing and we knew some of the teams that we worked with. Next slide, please. So what next? Well, we aim to develop interprofessional education further and embed the clinical educator group. Ongoing liaison with HEIs and support for clinical educators needs to continue. We need to continue to promote student placement activity and the workforce benefits associated with this. And also where there is underutilisation of placements to explore options outside of the Northwest. Next slide, please. Lucy and I hope that you found our presentation useful. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Lucy and Denise. That was fantastic. Great start to the presentations. What I'd like to do is hopefully we'll have some time at the end to invite some questions and comments from all our audience, because we want to be able to listen to everyone who's here today. So if you're hanging around till the end, that's great. Otherwise, we can email you some questions as well. But thank you for that. If I can now hand over to Katie from Wirral Community Health and Care NHS Trust, please.
Hi, everybody. Is my camera on so you can see me? I think it is now, yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks, Nisha. Okay, so I'm Katie Fisher. I'm the only practice education facilitator at Wirral Community NHS Foundation Trust. And I'm just going to share with you my experiences of taking on the sort of central allocation and management of allied health professional placements to help to meet our target of 5 additional allied health professional placements across the organisation. So next slide, please, Nisha. So what did we do to achieve what we achieved? I think it's really important to acknowledge that this was very much a team approach across the organisation that involved relationship building, improved governance and management of placement allocations. It involved a huge procurement and purchase of laptops and deployment of laptops, the development of a new sort of placement guidance strategy called the Autonomous Practice Framework. It also involved not just increasing capacity, but maintaining and in most cases improving quality as well. And we managed to open new placement areas, so teams that hadn't supported students ever or hadn't supported them for years were able to open up as a placement, and all of our teams supported more frequent placements, and all of that helped us to achieve above our targets. So next slide, please, Nisha. So this slide just shows you the kind of breakdown of our data in terms of how many placements we were able to offer for the past academic year, and how many placements were taken up. So we offered an additional 17 placements across all the professional groups, and 10 of those placements were taken up. Next slide, please. So how did we do it? So there were kind of lots of ways, really. First of all, and a really important part of the project here at Wirral Community was centralising placement allocation for allied health professionals. And as practice education facilitator, I had previously had no oversight, influence or understanding of capacity agreements for placement allocation for allied health professionals. Historically, that had been managed by team leaders and clinical education leads within each individual team. And of course, with the implementation of the student data collection tool, that needed to change anyway. And the CPEP project provided an additional driver, an opportunity for us to take that forward. One of the biggest parts of my role in this project was in influencing and engaging. So my initial challenge lay really in developing a knowledge and understanding of how allied health professional services and teams were managed across the organisation. I had the support of the Allied Health Professional Divisional Lead, and she was instrumental in providing that leadership, supporting and introducing me to the service leads. And so I was able to arrange a number of engagement meetings all over Teams to enable me to develop that understanding of how students were allocated by the HEIs to our teams. Those engagement meetings also provided an opportunity for me to seek to understand how placements were already managed, how students integrated into their teams, as well as showing me and learning about the challenges within each team in providing those placements. Also, the engagement meetings provided that opportunity to share the CPEP project aims, the background regarding clinical placement expansion, including the NHS People's Plan, and that helped to create an understanding within each team about why we really needed to achieve the aims of the projects, and how we were able to support each other over the coming academic year. And it really reduced resistance within the team and brought many people on board. So the engagement meetings weren't particularly easy. They were really challenging at times. The placement educators felt really anxious about how they'd be able to meet their KPIs while supporting the increased numbers of students. And of course, there were other challenges, just like everybody else, around the pandemic environment and social distancing that meant fewer people could work within bases in the traditional way. And also car sharing in the community posed a particular challenge. Even though we had a car sharing risk assessment in place, the majority of our staff really didn't feel safe to car share. So I learned that some teams hadn't supported students for a number of years for various reasons, including one team feeling that the level of care they provided was so acute that students shouldn't come to them, and another team that hadn't supported students for about 5 years because they had previously gone through a service redesign, paused their placements and had never recommenced taking them. So I utilised a coaching approach in my engagement sessions to provide that opportunity to respectfully challenge traditional and established clinical placement practices, and that helped to change mindsets and enable the new teams to open and also enable teams to take students more frequently throughout the year. One of the key things that we did as well was to celebrate success. So we shared all our wonderfully positive evaluations that we had back from our students, and we gave shout outs in our staff bulletin. Another key factor to achieving this was the recruitment of the practice education administrator. So he was initially three days a week from October to April, and since April he's been full-time, and he has been really key in supporting me in collating all our data, arranging student IT access, and he's developed SOPs for the audit process and the IG around our laptop estates, and he supported me with the induction process as well. And the biggest piece of feedback we've had from our teams is that this really reduces the pre-placement planning work that they have to undertake, so it takes some pressure off them. Of course, like many other trusts, we have used our funding to purchase clinical laptops, but in addition to that funding that we've received from the project, our organisation agreed to fund 152 laptops just purely for student use So our practice education administrator has also been very busy deploying those to teams and setting up an audit process to make sure that we know where all of those laptops are at any one time. The final thing was the development of our autonomous practice framework, which enables students within the community, where appropriate, to work indirectly supervised, either from home on projects or directly with patients. The autonomous practice framework was developed from the supervision and delegation framework that we implemented during the first phase of the pandemic. It's a multi-professional guidance document, and it also contains a toolkit that we have been able to add the allied health professional toolkit to as well. Next slide, please, Nisha. So, what did we learn from it all? So, for me, the biggest thing was that different professional groups and, in fact, different HEIs have different codes for different student placements, and that absolutely blew my mind, got my tongue in a right twist sometimes, and my brain in a right twist. So creating a chart with placement codes on was really instrumental for me in understanding the different placements experiences that each student should be having. Transition to new ways of working is often more effective when individuals and teams feel listened to, supported, involved and engaged. So being really open and honest about the PDSA model, acknowledging that some of these things that we were doing were new, so that we were planning, we would do it, we would evaluate and get feedback from everybody, and then update our plan and our models. Celebrating success is massively important, so having those shout outs in our bulletin has been really effective. And we also remember that the transition support doesn't just stop with the end of the CPEP project. Next slide, please, Nisha. So as we continue sort of the way forward for us, we're continuing with our engagement meetings, and this week I've already had a meeting where we're moving away from that traditional one-to-one model, and we're now supporting the teams to explore how they can use two-to-one or even three-to-one models. The autonomous practice framework is being embedded and promoted. We're taking part in a leadership and quality placement pilot starting in October with the Ellie project. Our speech and language team are developing some project work for students to undertake, and that involves teaching our care home staff, and we're hoping to develop a case study from that. The allocations remain central and managed by the learning and development team, and we continue to monitor and share the evaluations and celebrate that success in our shout outs in our staff bulletin. Final slide, please, Nisha. So already we have predicted that we will not just sustain the capacity that we have developed this year, but we're going to build on that again. And we have already offered, in comparison to this academic year, for next academic year, we've offered an additional 14 placements, and that is just using the one-to-one model. So for 2022, 2023, we hope to increase our capacity again using new and innovative models. Thank you very much. I hope you found that worth listening to and interesting, and maybe have picked up some little pointers or tips for your own projects for the future. Thank you.
That's great, Katie. Thank you so much, and hope you'll stay around till the end in case.
Definitely.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Thank you so much. So swiftly moving on to our next speakers from Merseycare NHS Trust, please.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Nisha. My name's Lynn King, and I'm the Trust-wide Strategic AHP Lead at Merseycare. And James Hester is going to join me in supporting the presentation in terms of our achievements around CPEP. Jackie Fuller, who is one of our practice education facilitators, has also supported this programme of work, along with other PEFs that we have linked to this project. But Jackie couldn't be here today, she's on leave, but I just wanted to mention her because she's been key. So if we can have the next slide, please, Graham. Okay, so I think we're going to have less slides than everyone else, but I think we've probably got very, very similar themes in terms of how we've gone about trying to do this in Merseycare. Right in the middle of the programme of work, Merseycare grew as an organisation. So the former North West Boroughs Hospital Trust came over and joined Merseycare, as did the community services from Southport and Formby Hospital Trust. So we've gone from initially needing to achieve an additional 10 student placements to actually needing to achieve an additional 20. And just at the outset, I will say we did achieve that in a sustainable way. So in terms of what we've achieved, we've now got a huge stock of student laptops across our AHP and psychology workforce. And we've got a system in place to issue and govern their use. We've got placements that are willing to try alternative models of student support. So, as people have already described, 2-to-1 models and part-time / project-based leadership placements. We've also enhanced partnership working with universities, and we've got a better understanding of how we can work together to make placements work when issues start to arise. How we did this was obviously the funding was really helpful in terms of enabling us to add to our student laptop resource. We'd already, prior to receiving the funding, knew we were going to have to do something in this area, so we had ordered a number, but we've added to that, and we've got over 50 laptops in place, and we're ordering more. We also pretty early on realised when we were ordering those laptops that we would need a standard operating procedure in place to enable us to keep track of them, to make sure they were issued, and we had a tracking system to know where they were going to and to bring them back to a central store, but also from an IPC perspective to make sure they were cleaned and safe to go back out again in COVID times. So that's been really helpful to kind of bottom all of that out. In terms of some of the other stuff, what we did pretty early on was try to connect the additional placements that we needed to how we currently work, really. So, you know, each year we will be sitting down with each professional group to look at how we allocate students across the next 12 months in terms of, you know, checking everything is equitable and those student educators that we've got are taking placements and, you know, which different placements they are. So pretty early on, we met with all of those teams, myself and the PEF, and James did similar in North West Boroughs prior to coming over to connect the ask, really, to build it into how we currently work so it's sustainable. We also reconnected with our university links. I think we always had those links there anyway, but we made particular effort to build those and strengthen them, and particularly because I think, like everyone else, in terms of making a start with this project, it felt like we went backwards initially because of COVID and the issues around social distancing, and as others have mentioned about, you know, sharing car journeys and you know, working from home, all of those issues. So we actually reduced capacity in our normal student offer first before we then started to build that back up and then look at the further additions in terms of this programme of work. So those meetings with the team leads to look at that were really key. We also, I'm sure like others, built in kind of regular briefings through our Trustwide AHP forum to make sure staff knew what was happening through the faculty with this and the other projects that are ongoing, and to keep people really kind of at the heart of what we were trying to do, and connect really in terms of why it's so important to do this work in terms of our future workforce, and you know, the struggles that we have already in terms of recruitment and retention. So building all of those work streams together so that we maximise support. Pretty early on, we realised that often our student educator database is out of date. We have new members of staff joining the organisation and might not have tracked them quickly enough to get them onto the database. So when our PEFs are out talking to deans, they don't often know about there may be extra capacity in the team. So we did a piece of work really to look to refresh that student database and put a system in place so that we keep that up to date. And when we were doing that, we also started to ask the question, so in terms of where people sit in teams, what's the capacity for the team at any given point in time in terms of students, so that we can start to look at that across the organisation, and now when we get additional requests that come in, we know where our capacity is. So that's been really important, key piece of work. We also, when we were updating the database, looked at who had the educator course and who needed it, so that then we could key those individuals into the right training programmes for their professional group, in terms of making sure, you know, all of our potential educators are ready to go at any point in time. We really looked at, I think because we're a growing organisation, we're still grappling with getting our structure right in terms of the AHP leadership and how that works at a divisional level. So the transition of organisations into Merseycare, we've tried to work really hard at a corporate level and at a divisional level to get this right. And we'll continue to work on that. So I'm going to hand over to James next for the next slide in terms of where next and our top tips in terms of what we've learned.
Thanks, Lynn. It was great to hear a lot of what has been implemented by others is what we've implemented ourselves, and I think it's really good that people have adopted very similar models out there, and it does seem to have really worked. And I think the main thing is to really promote alternative placement models as a matter of course. I think in one of the other presentations, it's selling the benefits of the different models to, you know, staff and to placements, and you'll have all found that some staff will maybe working very traditionally, and it's that one-to-one model, and breaking that ideology was a bit of a challenge sometimes, but it's about selling the vision, how we can do things differently, but not looking about just the here and now, but almost selling the vision of future recruitment and retention to the staff, and maybe where they are struggling or using increasing agency staff, you know, saying that if you do take the time now to invest, give a really, really good clinical placement, but in a different way, then the staff if they have a good experience, are more likely to look at us as organisations or as a region, and that they'd like to work in this region. So that was one of the key points we adopted. I think partnership working to resolve as a top tip probably can go throughout everything, not just alternative placement models, but also how we engage with teams who too easily did decline to take students, maybe using COVID as a barrier, things like maternity leave and sickness. And it was really important to engage and to listen to the teams and find out why they were struggling. So it wasn't kind of dictatorial, is that a word, of that you should take someone. It was, why can't you take someone? Let us understand what the barriers are. What can we do to support those barriers? Northwest Boroughs, as it was a huge organisation in terms of geography. So we stretched all the way from Knowsley all the way over to Greater Manchester. And because of that, there was very different models and teams and how things functioned. So a one-size-fits-all model or an edict that you must do it like this certainly didn't work. And I'd really encourage people that if you do have challenges, don't take no for an answer, but do that in the right way. Try and take the time to meet with staff, with the operational managers, find out what is important to them, and kind of sell the benefits. That was really, really important for us to get that buy-in. I think what Lynn said, but just to really reiterate this, there are lots of staff and teams out there, or what we found in Northwest Boroughs, again, because we were such a diverse and geographically huge organisation, that will gladly actually take students. They want students, but they weren't part of the current circulation list that the practice education facilitators held. And that's because staff turnover, a number of other things changes so quickly. Now I've put ESR down there, and that'll probably raise a few people's hackles, the ESR, because it's notoriously poor ESR. But just as a starting point, you can use ESR as a list to cross-reference the list of clinical educators your PEFs have. And I know Lynn had developed a dashboard to look at many different things in relation to our AHPs. But what we did do at Northwest Boroughs is look at our AHP staffing list and kind of annotate that to say this was a clinical educator, and where maybe band 6, band 7 and above staff weren't listed as a clinical educator, ask them, had they done training? Was there any gaps in their training? Did they want to take students? If not, why not? Sometimes people were part-time and they felt that was a barrier, but if they can buddy up with another part-time member of staff, that can be a real rich learning experience for students. So that's probably one of the main things is look at your workforce and make sure you know who in your workforce can take students and who in your workforce does take students, because there will be a gap between those two things. But you do need to develop processes to routinely update this information, because staff do move, go on, maternity leave, long-term sick, new starters. So that is a real key point, and how we almost unblocked a lot of placement capacity. You don't have to do weird and wonderful things. Sometimes the basic things, and if you get them right, it's really, really important. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, Graham, the next slide is just a questions one, everyone and our contact details. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lynn. If you're staying around, that'll be great till the end for any questions and comments, but that was fantastic. We are halfway through. We did plan a little break, but if everyone's happy to carry on, if that's okay, so we don't lose out on any time, is that all right? If I see a few nods, we'll go ahead. Okay. I think we'll carry on in that case. And I'd like to invite Clatterbridge Cancer Centre and our speaker from there, please. Gwen, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and great presentations so far. I must say, mine is much quicker. So, and just listening to your presentations, it just dawns on me the massive amount of work that you have to do. And we're very fortunate here at Clatterbridge because I'm the radiotherapy clinical tutor here. And so I essentially am half funded by the University of Liverpool. So all of our students are the University of Liverpool. So we have clinical education group meetings. I just have to sort of manage and facilitate their learning while they're here. So I probably come from quite a sort of different direction, because an awful lot of what you were talking about, I feel very fortunate in that we've already got in place. However, we have increased our number of students over the past 12 months, and will continue to do so probably. So I've just sort of gone through briefly my experiences of the project, if that's okay. Next slide, please. So I got involved mainly because we are quite a small trust compared to all the other groups in the Northwest, and also historically with radiotherapy and therapeutic radiography, there's quite a lot of people don't really I just thought it was important to actually be part of the project, to actually have therapeutic radiography there as a voice, because we are actually quite a small group of professionals really, and obviously we've got diagnostic colleagues here as well. So it did spark my interest, obviously, for my own students as well that come here, and the multi-professional learning. So as I said, my role is facilitating the students' learning while they're here, but we are increasing our numbers all the time. We don't ever refuse the amount of learners that we have, because the University of Liverpool always discusses it with us every year. So we have got agreement there, and also we are in partnership across the group with the Christie in Manchester and Preston as well. But I was very interested, I pricked my ears up when I heard about these workstream videos and the access to sort of live filming, because I do think that's something that we all get embedded within, and it's particularly myself and my colleagues and our own students, is that you just get so involved in your own profession that sometimes it's the timeline that interested me about learning more about where our patients are before and after, and going through other HPs once they've finished their treatment with us here. And also, I just think it's really important for us all to sort of gel as a group anyway. So that's sort of why I got involved. Next slide, please. It wasn't just myself, actually. I do apologise. I wrote this really quick because I'm actually having to work clinically at the moment as well, as manager students. So I do apologise. Time hasn't been on my side. So this was written very, very quickly. But myself and Lucy Wilcox, who works with me in the education team here at Radiotherapy at Clatterbridge, got involved, and we got involved in 2 cancer-related work streams for CPEP. And one of them was for a palliative patient that came through radiotherapy, and one came for radical treatment, so they'll come for us for a length of time of treatment. Palliative work stream was interesting because it was more, I got more involved and collaborated with our diagnostic colleagues, which was really good. Clinical tutor there as well, and that was sort of more from the diagnostic perspective, because I thought that would benefit our students as well in the future. And so it really highlighted, as we were developing these case studies though, and being in a group over MS Teams, over the network, it really highlighted how much we had to learn to understand and understand where all our roles fit in with each and every patient that comes across through us. And so I thought that was a really valuable story for the students as well, to sort of enhance their learning when they're here, and just focus on radiotherapy really, but they have to learn about everything else as well, obviously they do at the university. So I personally enhanced my understanding as well across the trust, across the network. You know, we are very fortunate here to have clinical tutors in diagnostic and radiotherapy, and also we have PEFs as well. So we are, you know, quite lucky in that respect. Next slide, please. So as I said, each weekly meeting I found really invaluable, and just trying to find out exactly where we needed to go with this case study, what would be useful. And it was only a small part of the whole project, but I found that I was really glad that we were involved as a trust. And I found, you know, it was quite interesting for all of us, of all the different years of experience, that, you know, there were questions that we have to say. And so, you know, people saying, I'm so sorry, I don't really understand where radiotherapy sits into all this. We have patients that come through radiotherapy, but, you know, we don't know much about it. So you know, and equally I was the same as well as the timeline about when our patients, sort of head and neck cancer patients, for instance, come through us, where it finishes. So, you know, it just highlighted again that if we felt like that after so many years of experience, then it's going to be invaluable to students. Next slide, please. I found it was hard sometimes to join the meetings, and so I know my colleagues tried to get involved a bit more as well, but time just wasn't on our side sometimes. But I did stick with it, and I found I learned a lot from it, and I was glad to be part of it. I'm never afraid to ask stupid questions and want to find out exactly what's going on, and it was interesting. I really enjoyed listening to all the other colleagues across the Northwest. It has been, like quite a lot of you were saying, it's been really tricky this last 12 to 18 months. We've only had our radiotherapy students back since last September. So the emphasis for me was getting the students into a high quality learning environment, but maybe not the quantity because of social distancing. So normally we would have 2 students to each treatment area or area within radiotherapy, and sometimes even 3. So we have already had that sort of model of finding other ways to enhance their learning, as well as making sure that the quality of their actual learning of the exact job is. But of course, it has been different since September. So the emphasis, because they'd had a break because of COVID, we have had to just focus on literally the exactly what the job is, so that they could gain their clinical skills and gain their objectives, which are set by the University of Liverpool. So being part of this did feel like a bit of a luxury to me sometimes, that I had to carve out. But you know, I think it's been invaluable, and I will use this going forward from September when I'm thinking of the next rota that I have to put together for next year. I did enjoy it. Have I got another slide? Yes, going forward. Thank you. So I will use this toolkit. So I was really glad to be in part of it because I might not have highlighted and found out about it. And I will use this to put together sort of more sort of practice framework around a knowledge base, so that they can sort of learn on the job as well. But also we've got one of the laptops now, we've got one in diagnostic, and we might have other equipment coming, so that they can access the e-learning for health toolkit to find out more about things, and actually especially the case studies I thought were very, very useful, and actually to engage them in the practical aspect, but other than sort of do some working around that. So I will use it, and I've sort of volunteered to be a toolkit champion and trying to get the message out across our trust as well. And that's it, I'm afraid. It was quite a quick talk compared to all of the. It was really interesting to hear of all the challenges that you've all had to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gwen. That was so interesting to listen to you from a work stream member point of view. So thank you for sharing that as well. And I love the little doggy picture there.
Yes, I just want to say thank you because I really enjoyed being part of
it. Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite our next speaker from Walton Centre, please. Over to you, Oliver. Oliver, we can't hear you. No. Maybe lose your headphones? No? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Oliver, do you want to sort your sound, and I can invite someone else to speak in the meantime? Is that all right? Okay. In that case, if you wouldn't mind, Rosie and Liz, to come in now, if that's all right. So invite Rosie and Liz from Luft.
Hello. I am here. I had to switch the fan off, otherwise you would never have heard me.
Just go to my window.
So I'm Liz Roden. I'm a Divisional Director of AHPs at Liverpool University Hospital Trust. I'm just introducing this as Rosie will be taking us through the slides and has worked very hard for this placement expansion programme, I'd also like to include all the clinicians who have taken on additional work, embraced different models of working, and really have worked so well this week, this last year. So it's all that I'd just like to thank them, because they have just gone with so many things. It's been fantastic. So next slide, please. So we committed to achieving an additional 30 students across our organisation, which includes Broad Green, Aintree Hospital and the Royal Liverpool. And that was with 10 allied health professions. And it was a bit of a climb. That's why I put some that, because again, like everybody, we were all going through COVID, staff were isolating, all the other challenges that all the other organisations have. But despite that, we did achieve it. And as I was saying, it wasn't easy, but it was achieved. Okay, so next slide, please. So this is just these were the 10 professions that we actually provided additional placements for in the organisation. So again, you know, some were much more easy than others, but just to say that it's just very diverse. Okay, so I'm going to pass you on to Rosie, who's going to give you all the details of actually what we did.
Thanks, Liz. Nisha and everybody, can you hear me? I just want to check. Yeah, some nods. Oh, fantastic. So hi everyone, my name's Rosie Divers. I am one of the practice education facilitators for LUFT, Liverpool University Hospitals, but I am the PEF for Allied Health Services and I am an OT, occupational therapist by background. So how did we do what we did when we achieved those additional 30 placements across those professions? So predominantly it's, again, as we've heard from some of the other presentations, it's the alternative placement model was our first port of call. So actually we trialled split rotation and blended learning approaches. And that is, as we'll know, so we might have a placement area that might have one student. So we were able to double those students by having one student physically present in the clinical area for the first half of the week, if you like. And the second half of the week, that student would be working on a project. Now, that was a mixture between ourselves as clinicians and working with our HEI partners as well. And that's where they come in really helpful and really collaborative working. As we know, some areas will say, goodness, I've got this audit I've been meaning to do for so long, and that's perfect. Sometimes with all the issues that were going on, we weren't able to identify that. So that's where our collaboration with our HEI partners came in. So that was one of the first ones. The second one we did, we trialled within certain settings, but an MSK physiotherapy outpatient setting. So 4-to-1 model. So we have a physiotherapist in that setting. We had 4 students with that educator, but the educator was almost supernumerary. So the students would carry out their assessments, then come out to the educator for that support with what they were doing. It's very much a coaching approach. And so we adopted that. Some of the things that we've discussed as well is some of those kind of common sense things, isn't it? We had a really good look at shift patterns, what was historically happening, when do we work? We certainly do 7-day working in most of our services now, and we weren't perhaps always including students within that, so we were physically able to see if we can incorporate that. All of these things really helped with the pandemic in terms of social distancing as well, certainly within the outpatient therapy department where staff and teams were perhaps redeployed, and that social distancing was a real issue. So we're trying to balance that. The CPEP tools for Nisha and the team, obviously we used those, and we reached out to Nisha and the team quite a lot. The last thing I've got on the slide here, which really, I really feel strongly about this one, it's that clinician engagement and support. I don't want people, staff and educators to feel that this is happening to them. So trying to change that mindset, I would like to, what the approach was really, we were trying to empower and to enable those clinicians and those educators in their areas to seek solutions to what the issues are. I wanted them to feel part of it, not that it was happening. So to be able to take ownership for perhaps why we're not taking students in that area and what what would you suggest and how can we problem solve, work together? So that is where coaching really comes in. I think it was Katie Fisher before who mentioned the coaching approach, so it was very similar. So that's how we did, a very brief overview. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the main challenges. So if you may well be aware, but where we are in Liverpool, so we did merge. So what that means is we've got our Royal Liverpool and Broad Green University Hospitals merged with University Hospital Aintree, so to become LUFT. So Liverpool University Hospitals Foundation Trust. So that happened at the end of 2019. So we can imagine and appreciate all that came with that. So whether it's services becoming reconfigured, integration of teams, IT systems, all of these things that, as we know, take a long time. And we're still in process with that, certainly. And then we threw a pandemic in on top of that all at the same time, as we've all lived. So that was a real challenge. And I've put things like the subsequent changes in the management structure. That applies to all divisions. So we are still certainly at the point of restructuring and jobs being confirmed and structures and things being set out. So all of those were a real impact on top of we need to provide more placements and the reasons why. So they were real issues for us. Next slide, please. So yeah, so we can appreciate actually that things that I've just gone over there had a very real and significant impact on staff's physical and psychological health and well-being. As we know, staff are fatigued. And I think as part of that, when we're talking about psychological health, that really came, I think the pandemic really brought this to the forefront, that we become more open and honest and we talk about perhaps the psychological distress, and we were seeing it a lot more, weren't we, with ourselves. So being able to recognise that and to talk about that. So the PEF team, Practice Education, we actually facilitated, or we commissioned and facilitated a mental health first aid course, 1 and 2 day for staff. And as having attended that myself, it's really given you the tools to recognise that within your own areas of stress and whatever is going on, and to recognise that with your colleagues and your students. Off the back of that, our educators were reporting a lot more open and honest discussion with students as well, experiencing that distress for whichever reason, with the pandemic thrown in on top. So it could well be they've got their personal impact in their own life, and now we're having to come into a placement area. It could be, it's quite common, perhaps people have never set foot in a hospital or a clinical area, and now we're asking them, we're trying to support people to do that whilst achieving their learning outcomes with a pandemic on top of it. So it's all become very relevant, really, and those were big issues for us. The biggest part with this is change management, I think, with regards to going back to the student element of placements and capacity. And I put historical capacity and specialisms. It's really the issues we've discussed, I think, the other presentations. I can see you nodding, Nisha, so I know you. Yeah, so it's what we've discussed. It's very a similar theme across trusts, isn't it, nationally? So sometimes it might just be that those areas, just for whatever reason, have not taken students for a while. Sometimes it's highly specialist areas, which is ironic because they have so much to give. So that coaching approach again really came in. How can we help those educators and team leads to look at what they're able to provide and provide a solution? And from the PEF team and the relevant people listening to those challenges and supporting staff to seek a solution, really. So that engagement with clinicians and with educators is really important. Yeah, next slide, please. So what we want to do is, yes, we achieve those figures, but for us, it's very much about that sustainability moving forward. So I've put some ideas down that I'll talk through. So for us, what we're doing at the moment across professions is we're having a really good look at all the clinical placement areas trust-wide within all of those professions, and we're trying to make sure that that it's an equitable allocation. For different reasons it might not be, so we're really kind of looking fresh. We're saying, if I'm an occupational therapist and wherever I work, well, there should be a student incorporated into that team. So that's what we're working on at the moment. You can appreciate we're a big organisation, so it's very much a work in progress. Off the back of the CPEP, we were able to identify there were some professions that were doing amazing things for other perhaps not for their own registrations, so their own students of their own pre-registration placements. They were providing placements for other professions, but not their own. So we're challenging that, and we're seeing how we can support some of those professions to move forward. And sometimes it might be some professions that we're opening up to different HEIs, and we're trying to increase numbers, but bearing in mind the equitable allocation of that. Support workers, we're interested in pursuing, because we are. This is another area that we know our assistant staff and perhaps our assistant practitioner staff have got such a wealth of knowledge and experience and are very much part of the team, and the team perhaps wouldn't run without them. So we need to have them more involved in the day-to-day support with students. So sometimes on the other end of that challenge, you know, I can understand people saying, well, it's in my job description or not. But I think if we can empower teams to be more involved and think a bit more creatively, and our support workers are a huge part of our workforce and are really important. So we want them to feel valued. Briefly, we discussed before about the senior clinicians supporting student placement areas and that expectation, and that links in as well with if we think about our professional obligations with the HCPC, what's in our job description, and those supportive conversations is some of the tact that we would need to take. We're also very much looking into exploring leadership placements and AHP placements in non-traditional roles. So I put myself out there. I am an OT and I'm working as a PEF at the moment. So and I have an immediate line manager who's also in our team, who's a dietitian by background. So we are so to see how we can incorporate our experiences and support. And I think if we walk with our staff and walk with our educators and produce hopefully a positive experience, then that's hopefully we're going to help to change that culture of what we used to do. Does it necessarily work? Let's look slightly differently. Also learning from other professions, multi-professional educators. So we know that the NMC standards changed and that any HCPC registered professional can support a student nurse in their training and vice versa. I think it's really important we learn together, we train together, we work together so that there's ideas that can be shared between us really. So like an action learning approach. I put down about the PEF team and that support, and that was really, really invaluable, I think, not perhaps from my perspective, but it could just be general day-to-day things. The PAR assessment, I don't have an account, I don't know how to use it. Who do I ask about that? So we could do bits and pieces like that, but we're also highly involved in the last year with a lot of debriefs with our educators. Positive experiences, not so positive, being able to talk through and have that outlet, and that's what we were there for. We did an awful lot of signposting and discussions around psychological health as well, both for educator and student. We do an awful lot of teaching, so we encourage that interaction, so for staff to come on coaching training. I've put down SHL, which is an acronym for Supporting Healthcare Learners, because that's another bespoke training that our team, the PEF service here at Luft, created and deliver. And it is for those healthcare professionals that perhaps haven't had a formal mentorship or a course at the university to be able to take students. And as we know, they're becoming less and less, but we find that in practice, it's that action learning, real life scenario approach we find educators find most useful. So we do action learning. It is multi-professional, so it would be very common to have a nurse with a radiographer, with an OT, and we all come with those experiences of students, good, bad and ugly, either or, and that be able to learn from those and learn from each other. And the idea is to give those clinicians those strategies to deal with the challenges that we absolutely appreciate. And we did an awful lot of pastoral support given the challenges that we've all experienced for the last year. So that's, I think, what we think about sustainability. Last slide, please. We wanted to share this. This was on Twitter. So some physio students that looked like, you can see under their masks, they looked like they had a really positive experience with us, and they were part of, they were actually on the Aintree site, but they felt strong enough to be able to put that out on Twitter and have a positive experience, and that was with our coaching, with our 4-to-1 and blended placement experience. We are in the process with one of our main HEIs to formally evaluate the blended placement model, how was that experienced from both the student and from the educator. So that is very much a work in progress. We don't want to not reflect upon it, and we know as well, because we have, I think I might have missed that, Liz, the fact that we're going to be having a new hospital as well thrown in potentially next year. So reflecting on all that's going on and all the challenges and how well it's gone, and shall we continue to do it that way? And that's what we want, that engagement with our clinicians and staff. So that's a bit of a snapshot. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Liz.
I think I mean, this is something I'd like to add, and it's come up numerous times that, you know, we can do this practice placement expansion, but it is draining the resources of the clinicians, and we do need to look at those models. Rosie is our only HP PEP at the moment, so the size of our organisation, she does an absolutely fantastic job, but we need to look at how we strengthen that team. And it sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's very much, we get money in for placements, but where does that money go? And that's what I'm trying to still unpick. I've been to various people and they keep sending me to different other places. So we need to look at that. But also, I know they said in Imaging, they have had clinical tutors for many years. And is there something there that we actually help with the clinicians? So there's things I think we need to strengthen to support the clinicians to enable us to expand. Because we're not just talking about undergraduates here, we're talking about undergraduates, postgraduates, apprenticeships routes, our support workers, newly qualified. There's a whole host of people that need that support. So we really do need to look at that side of it. Yes. Can we keep taking more and more students on without strengthening that side of it? I would welcome some people's thoughts around what they've got, what works.
That's great. Thank you, Liz and Rosie. Thanks for that presentation, and very insightful as well. What we're going to do is see if Oliver is ready, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of time for people to come back with any thoughts. So Oliver, are you, is your sound sorted, do you think?
Can you hear me, Nisha?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. There was an issue with my camera, so you're going to have to make do with my voice, okay?
Oh, it's one or the other today. That's fine. So over to you, Oliver.
Okay. Hello, my name is Oliver Tierney. I'm the Clinical Lead for Education and Development, Walton Neuro Operating Theatres. And I was one of a number of AHPs that was involved in this really quite brilliant project that we've been in. Next slide, please. So once upon a time, and it feels a bit like that. I was going through my emails recently and I saw an email from Nisha from the 1st to the 12th, 2020, a long time ago when we were invited into this group. But I think it's a testament to us all in this group and a testament to Nisha's team that during unprecedented times, we have never lost the momentum and we have achieved so much. And I cannot understate how positive an experience this has been for the Walton Centre as a whole, and I hope this will demonstrate that. Next slide, please. So first we'll look at what we achieved and how we did it. Next slide. So of course the primary focus of this project was to increase student capacity across our trust. So we looked at various ways of doing that. The area that I managed, the operating theatres, was what we would class as low-hanging fruit. We'd lost a couple of ODPs previously, so we have now agreed to do 1+1 student year on year, and I'm very hopeful in the next couple of years we will get back to our pre-COVID level of 7 ODP students in our operating theatres. When we actually looked at X-ray, we discovered that X-ray was much more of a spoke placement. So this was, again, another bit of low-hanging fruit for us. And now X-ray actually is going to be taking 2 students into diagnostic X-ray, and equally is now supporting 2 additional students on a rotational master's program. The physio department, even though they take quite a vast amount of students already, have also agreed to take additional students, and we'll discuss how they did that shortly. Next slide, please. Dietetics, well, they were quite savvy in how they managed to increase their student capacity. They actually increased their student placement by 5 weeks, so that increased it to 28 weeks. And because of that, that's resulted in, again, a +1 year-on-year increase. SALT are exactly the same. They've allocated an additional 13% additional placement hours, and we're hopeful that, again, will give us about a +1 year-on-year. So overall, we are looking at between 7 and 8 additional student placements across the Walton Centre. The cynics among us would say that's a drop in the ocean, but this is is a sustainable progress that will allow us to move forward yearly. I am very hopeful if we're invited back next year, we can show you that we have maybe doubled those numbers once again. Next slide, please. So I want to really focus in on the therapies team. Like I say, X-ray and theatres were kind of the low-hanging fruit. We had capacity to increase our numbers, but the therapies teams had to really look at how they taught their students to increase their placements. So therapies within Walton Centre, they met to discuss how placements would learn from each other. They created a draft multi-professional peer placement timetable, and we'll look at that on the next slide. And equally, after discussions with the work streams that came out of this project, we realized that we need to have less reliance on the face-to-face contact and explore the technologies that actually COVID has brought to the forefront, such as Zoom and Teams. Next slide, please. So this is a draft student timetable for a week. As you can see, the therapies team alongside all the other teams, AHP teams at Walton, are now going to be embracing the virtual induction and tours. We're hopeful that this will mean the students are more understand the area before they come in. We can get all the paperwork and IT access for them, and we can do that all virtually. So like I'm saying, we're moving away from that traditional model of face-to-face. Equally, as we move through the week, you will see that we've put video clinics into this placement, another innovation that we can now use, so students can sit and observe the clinics, or they can link in via video to observe these placements. This has been a really exciting time for the therapies department as a whole, and the increase in students is, it's such an important thing that we've done. Next slide, please. It would be remiss of me not to talk about the films. The films were a really exciting opportunity for the Walton Centre and a really exciting time for the allied health professionals within this trust. We were allowed to have the films filmed at the Walton Centre, which meant we could bring in a variety of our allied health professionals to create these educational films to promote the roles that we desperately need staff to be taking up, even to the point of writing the storyboards, the scripting, etc., etc. Next slide, please. And just a few pictures from the filming. As you can see there, it was wonderful to have staff from all over the trust coming to the Walton Simulation Centre and being actively involved in these films. I've seen the first drafts of the films, and we had great fun watching it all together. There was a lot of embarrassed giggling, etc., going on. But no, all the staff involved in this saw this as a hugely positive experience, and an experience they greatly needed to get out of this constant cycle of COVID that I think we've all found ourselves in. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we even managed to press gang one of our neurosurgeons, Mr. Nick Carlton-Bland, to come in and do some filming with us as well. Next slide, please. So what are our plans moving forward? Next slide. Well, like I said earlier, we need to sustainably increase our student capacity. We're 11,000 AHPs down across the UK, so we need to be able to keep increasing our student capacity, but in a sustainable manner. Some of the models that were spoken about during the work streams, the 2-to-1, the 3-to-1 placement models, are now being looked at to put into play in certain areas. Cross-discipline training, so exploring cross-team placements across, for example, acute and long-term conditions and outpatient teams. We also are now doing regular multi-professional clinical education meetings within Walton, constantly looking at the reviewing of our timetables and our placement opportunities, and also looking at the types of placement we are offering. So for example, there we look at the trachea placements. This is suitable for both physios and or SALT students, and clinical educators from both professions therefore can be involved with that, and there's less pressure on one individual department. We can spread that across all the AHP roles. Next slide, please. And finally, from this work stream, from all the work we did at Walton, we actually were pushed forward to create our own Walton AHP working group. So we created a job description, we presented that to our exec board. We now have an established AHP lead within Walton and an established allied health professional working group that is working, meets on a monthly basis. And we're working together and we're building collaboration across AHP groups. I think that's one of the great problems with AHPs. There's so many of us diffusely spread across trusts that we don't meet often enough to discuss what we can do for each other. And I think this is a great step to do that. Equally, we also have 2 practice placement toolkit champions. So all in all, it's been a really positive experience, Nisha. We're so glad we got involved with this, and we're hopeful that next year when we come back, we'll have even more positive things to talk about. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Oliver. Thank
Not
you
a
for
problem.
that. Somebody had to explain the reference to brain to me, but now
That's
I know.
that's Pinky in the Brain, yeah, from the 90s. I'm a child of the 90s, Nisha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is, given the time that we've got left for this, Vicky Hunt, the interim chair of the faculty, is unfortunately not able to join us because of operational pressures. But I'll quickly go through some of Vicky's slides on her behalf. And then if people want to hang back, if they have time, they're welcome to stay back and speak to us or any of the speakers. Otherwise, you're free to go at 3 o'clock. So next slide, please, Graham. So Vicky wanted to share what St. Helens and Knowsley NHS Trust have done briefly. They wanted to stress that they had achieved their target that was set out to them in these challenging times, like all the others. What they want to continue to do is capture that up-to-date clinical educator list, which a lot of you have spoken about, and also review the in-house process for student placements. They're making it a point to make student placements an area of focus in their professional assurance group meetings as well. They're looking at widening the scope of placements to include leadership placements and possibly a hub and spoke model with the local authority. They've also got staff who have now volunteered to be our toolkit champions. So in all, quite similar to what some of the other organizations have spoken about today. Next slide, please. So this bit, of course, these are Vicky's words, but I'd like to say it on behalf of the whole project team, really, that the success of CPEP was down to all of you, to all of the stakeholders who were involved in this, all the staff who, despite all the pressures, have come forward and agreed to have some headspace to try something different. So wanted to say a massive thank you and recognition for all your hard work that you've gone above and beyond in these very challenging times. We hope that CPEP was a beginning and not an end to a journey at looking at what we do well, but what we can improve as well. If you remember where we started from last November to here, it's a massive collective achievement, and we hope that CPEP has just scratched the surface with that. We know that a new round of CPEP funding has been announced. The bids are due in September. And we will be working with Liz and the council to look at what ideas stakeholders and organizations have now, and whether we want to put another bid in to build on the work that has already been achieved here. So if we go to the next slide. And what I wanted to just reinforce is we need the toolkit champions. So if you are not sure if your organization has already volunteered to be the toolkit champion working party, please do drop us an email. And we want to assure that there is collective cross-system leadership support for looking at student placements and trying to do things differently. So we want to continue to build on this work. Now, before we finish, if we were in a real room, we were not in the virtual environment, we would have stopped at this point and given a round of applause to all of yourselves for doing this fantastic work and showcasing it today. It's been great to listen to you. So I can see some virtual claps, but what I wanted to do is see if you can unmute yourself, and just for 10 seconds, just let's have a round of applause and a pat on the back for all the hard work that you've all done. So don't be shy. Thank you everyone for being here today. And again, can't say thank you enough for all the dedication and enthusiasm from all in the project team. Our contact details are on the final slide, but you know where we are. We'll send the recording around as well. But yeah, we'll be hanging around if anyone wants to stay back and have a chat, but otherwise we're free to go. Thank you very much for your time again. Bye.
Thank you, Nisha. It's nice to put faces to names, Graham and Charlotte. Thank you, everybody. It was really interesting.